inner circle. Because we have a really special guest. Paul Jarvis is someone who's writing and work I've respected for a long time and I've followed for a long time. He's a well-known web designer and sort of one of the world experts on freelancing. And I'm really excited that we get to talk to him today, and we get to ask him a few questions on how to become a better freelancer and what it means to work for yourself and work from home and build a client list. And this is particularly close to my heart because I've been working independently since leaving university. So it's very much close to what I end up doing every day, and I'm really excited to get to talk to Paul. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So maybe if we could just get started, can you tell me a little bit more about your background and maybe relevant to freelancing too, right? Like we were just chatting before the show and you said that you've been freelancing for 17 or 18 years, and I don't think there are that many people out there who have that kind of a track record at it, right? So how'd you get into it? What's it like?
Yeah. So basically, I was in university for computer science. I didn't like being in university. I was doing more programming on my own projects and other things than I was in school, so I left, and then I went to work for an agency in Toronto, and I worked there for a little bit, and then I realized that kind of I wasn't jiving with the way that they were running the show. I really liked working with the clients, but I wasn't jiving with the way that the higher-ups were running things, and I became the creative director there, and so I quit. And I was going to make a resume, go find a job at another agency. And the day that I quit, I started to get phone calls from the clients that I was working with at the agency saying like, hey, Paul, we know you're the one who's doing all the work. We really liked working with you, not so much the agency. Where are you going? We will bring our work with you to whatever agency you go to next. And I think it was probably like the third or the fourth call that I got like that. I was just like, light bulb, bing. Like, maybe I should work for myself. So I kind of accidentally fell into freelancing. But I don't know, it kind of stuck. Like I've been doing this since the 90s, so it kind of stuck. And I've been, full-time freelancer since basically day one. And I was lucky enough to start with basically a client list.
That's probably the best way to start. So no, that makes a lot of sense. That's great. And sort of what has the arc felt like to you? I mean, I can imagine that at day one you had a client list, so that's obviously an indication of demand. But what's the arc been like, and what's it like for you today?
So the good thing was that when I started freelancing, I knew what I was doing in terms of my craft. So I knew web design, I knew programming, I knew a bit of how to deal with clients, but I didn't know the business side of things. When I was in school, I didn't take a single business class. I knew nothing about finance or bookkeeping. I actually still don't know anything about bookkeeping. That hasn't changed. Just in terms of dealing with clients, dealing with contracts, dealing with expectations and communication, that's really where I felt that I knew absolutely nothing about those things, and I really sucked at it for a really long time. And I feel like as I've become a better freelancer, my skills have obviously grown because the industry's changed a lot with web design over the years. But I feel like the reason why I can do well at freelancing is because I figured those things out. I figured out communication and expectations and that sort of thing. So that was really the arc. I didn't know any of those things, and I really sucked at it, and I got screwed on a couple of projects. I didn't meet expectations, which really sucked on a few projects early on in that. So as I kind of learned, I got better at that, and getting better at those things has made me a much better freelancer. And it's not that I'm even like the best designer or the best programmer, but I feel like in a lot of ways I'm the best at communicating with my clients and teaching my clients what are good things that they can ask for or want and what might not be the best things, because a lot of freelancers complain that their clients always ask for the wrong things or ask for stupid things or want the logo bigger or things like that. And I feel like it's our job as whatever we do to not just say, yes, I'm going to do that and then silently resent them, but to teach them a bit. Like if they want something, teach them why that may not be right, because they're experts at what they do, but they may have never done a website project before with a professional, or maybe only one or two, and they did it with somebody that didn't speak up. So I feel like that's really where I kind of find my magic sauce is the being able to communicate effectively with clients. And it doesn't always work. Like sometimes I work with clients that just don't listen, and it's not always the best. But I feel like the majority of the time it kind of works out, and we kind of both want the same thing. We both want the same end result, which is their business doing better, and the web design is just the tool for them to get to there.
So, and I think it's one that, especially people just starting out on their own, are sometimes struggle with, and that is you can't always say yes, right? and it's really tempting because if clients want something and you want their business, don't you always want to say yes?
I almost never say yes. I argue with my clients, but it's not a mean, angry arguing. And I always relate it back to goals. So before I have a conversation with clients about what they want in terms of design, I have a conversation with them about what their business goals are. Because then I can always steer the conversation back to, well, okay, you want your logo bigger. How does this relate to the goals that you have? Are people going to buy 10% more of your products if your logo is 10% bigger? Probably not. Maybe we can kind of find a happy medium. So I lead with goals first, with their business goals first, and then I find that really helps rein in like wild and wacky requests that they have, because we both want the same business goals, but there may be different ways with the design to kind of get there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So maybe if we take a step back from your personal arc of entering and then excelling within freelancing, have you seen the nature of freelancing change in the market overall? I feel like it's a very different world for people who are working independently than it was 15 years ago.
Yes and no. I think in some ways it's kind of the same, and in some ways it's a lot different. So the way that it's the same is too many freelancers kind of think of themselves as just laborers, where they get paid an hourly wage and the client tells them what to do and then they do it. But in that scenario, you're kind of competing with anybody that could charge less. Like somebody could go on, you can find website designers on Fiverr for $5. Like honestly, I kind of want to hire some of them because I want to see the website you get for $5. So freelancers, that hasn't changed. A lot of freelancers still consider themselves laborers. But where I see it changing is people like myself or other people that do the type of freelancing that I do, is we've run businesses for a while now. A lot of us have developed and released products. So we not only know the web design side of things, we also know the business side of things. I've been involved in a bunch of startups. I've launched a bunch of businesses. I've written books. I've got products. So I kind of understand my clients because I would be a client of mine. So I understand my clients because they have similar businesses to me. So it's not only, people don't just hire me to make their website look pretty, they hire me because they want kind of the overall consulting for their online business. They know what they do, but I know how to make what they do work online in the best possible way. So I see that changing because in the beginning, web designers didn't really have that business or that marketing side because a lot of us were just like nerds. Like fresh out of school or just spending all their time illustrating or drawing or writing code. But now there's so much crossover into businesses, like with the Nathan Barrys or the Brennan Dunns or those sorts of people who are as good business people as they are at design and code.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point, and so I guess that raises something that's pretty important. As you said, there are dozens of online platforms where you can hire freelancers of any kind, not just for web design, but for pretty much anything you could dream up to do your labor for you, right? And so from the freelancer's perspective, how do you differentiate? How do you show that what you provide is not a commodity and that you're not competing on price?
Well, there's a few things. So the first one is not to charge by the hour because then you get punished for being fast and good at your job. So that to me, like I always charge by project. Unless it's just updates, then I say it's going to take this long, this is the cost. But I never give a time because if my expertise makes me faster, I don't want to be punished for that. The second thing is the differentiator between being like a laborer and a leader, or whatever you want to call it, is that you have the ability to solve a client's problem in a unique way, in which case you become less interchangeable. You become more of like a consultant that also has a skill. So I can help figure out what's wrong with my clients' businesses, tell them what we need to do, collaborate with them, and then make a website based on all of the problems that I can help them solve. Whereas a laborer is just like, yeah, you want the logo green? Logo's green. You want this page? Okay, I've coded this page. Whereas I argue with them and I talk to them about, okay, does this work with the goal? Is this ultimately going to work? Maybe we can do some A/B tests. Maybe we can test out copy. So it's more than just web design with me. It's problem solving, and that's really how freelancers can differentiate themselves, is by showing that they understand that client and they empathize with the problems they have, and then that they can solve the problem in a way that only they know. So it's not like, I'm just going to pick somebody else on Fiverr. I'm going to spend $25, 5 websites, and pick the best.
Fair enough. So given that, what's the biggest mistake that you see freelancers making, or that you've made yourself?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to a lot of freelancers, especially in kind of the field that I work in, are creative people. And creative people have a lot of self-doubt, or they feel like they're imposters if they try to charge more or direct their clients and that sort of thing. So I think having confidence is a big thing, because a lot of us don't have, like, I don't have that much confidence, but when I need to, I can kind of turn it on. And I know that that confidence is coming from a place, like, I've done, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of websites, and I've run a bunch of businesses, I've started businesses, I failed at businesses, so I feel like my track record and my expertise is valuable when I kind of mesh it in with what the client knows. So they know their business, I know how business works on the internet, and when it comes together, that's kind of where the best thing is. So the mistakes that people make are not really trusting what they know, because a lot of people who are freelancing have quite like a wealth of knowledge. So knowing that and being a bit more confident in that, I think, is a good thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And what's sort of in the 17 or 18 years you've spent doing it, what's the most counterintuitive thing you've learned about freelancing or design?
I think that the client isn't always right. You hear that like business parable about, oh, the customer's always right, the customer's always right, and that might be good if you're selling jeans or something, but if you're selling something where it's a super customizable solution, it's like bespoke, it's something that you have to come up with and create for that person, as opposed to them just going in and saying, that's the pair I want, then the customization is where your expertise comes into play. So being able to delicately argue with your client or challenge them. I challenge my clients. If they want something, I ask them why they want that thing. And I work with them to push them a bit to see, like, is this just something that you like aesthetically? Is this going to actually apply to your customers? Because we're building the site for their audience. We're not building it for them. We're not building it for me. We're building it for their audience, which drives their business. So listening and leaning a lot on that instead of just the whims of what the person who hired me wants. I side with their customers, not with them a lot of the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So maybe we can get a little peek into your day-to-day. Like, for example, I had a friend who's a designer here in San Francisco who was wondering whether, for you, do you have like 2 or 3 clients at a time? Do you try to have very few clients with whom you're doing large projects? Or do you try to spread it out? Do you have 25 clients at a time and you're sort of mixing and matching and juggling?
Yeah, for me, the sweet spot is 2 or 3 clients, staggered so that I don't have 2 or 3 clients starting on the same date. I usually spread them out, and projects for me typically run about 8 to 10 weeks. And I like to stagger start dates by about 2 weeks. So I'll start a project, in 2 weeks I'll start another, in 2 weeks I'll start another, then I won't take on another client for a month or 2, and then I'll start one. So it staggers, and I find that when I wasn't doing so much of my own stuff, I was usually doing about 4 or 5 projects at the same time, but now that I have so many writing obligations and I've launched courses and books and all this other stuff that also bring in revenue and account for quite a bit of my income, I've kind of scaled that back. So my client work is, and I keep those income streams separate, so I can see like, okay, if I'm making more money with courses and books, I can kind of bring the client work down. So right now I'm doing about half of what I usually do. So 50% of my time is spent writing and making courses and marketing my stuff, and then 50% of my time is spent doing client work. And I don't do projects that are very differing in scope. So all of the projects that I do for my clients tend to be about the same amount of work, the same type of deliverables, the same timelines, the same budgets, and so I know exactly what's coming. I have to spend a lot of time researching and working with them and collaborating with them, but at least I know the scope is the same, and I find that makes it easier just for me to wrap my head around. So I know exactly what needs to happen to get it from start to finish without having to look back and say like, okay, oh, this project has like these 50,000 extra things. I don't have to worry about that. I just do stuff that's all the same in terms of scope.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you actually dive into a project, there's always a balance, right? And maybe this is no longer the case for you because your scope of work is similar for many of those projects. But I'm sure it took some learning to get there. And so when you're starting a new kind of project, for example, if it's a bespoke project, how do you balance research and production, right? Like how do you balance the amount of time and effort that you have to drive into figuring out what the solution should be versus building that solution?
Yeah, I usually spend, because I'm lucky, the projects are all about the same scope, so I always spend about the same amount of time researching. And then I also get the client to do about the same amount of research as well, so then we can kind of compare notes and see. So it's always usually, for me, for the projects that I do, it's always usually about 4 or 5 days of work. Like I'll spend, like one of the weeks in the development of a project is research and talking to audience and that sort of thing, and then the other 7 to 9 weeks is the actual work. And then sometimes there's a week or two at the end where we like A/B test or run it by some beta testers first or that sort of thing. But the research is definitely important, but that's never the majority of the project. The majority of the project is almost always the creation.
And if we take the 30,000-foot view, really step back, what role do you see designers playing in society? Because I think that's sort of an interesting question given your career arc as well. Now that you've gotten much more involved on the business side and seen how design relates directly to business goals. How do you see that? How do you see your work fitting into the larger context?
Yeah, I think as a whole and as an industry, I think designers are really disruptors. Like we really have the ability, if we kind of step outside just the narrow scope of what we're doing and learn auxiliary fields, like learning things like A/B testing, marketing, writing. I think every designer should know how to write well. I don't think that's a nice to have. I think that's a need to have. I think the more auxiliary skills designers can have, the more potential there is to be greater disruptors in industry and to really lead projects. And I see a lot of companies that are really design driven do really, really well. Like if you look at the Nests or the Square credit card reader things, or some of these companies, or even Airbnb, you look at these companies that are really led by the design and the aesthetic do really, really well. It's because the design teams that they have are really, they don't just play inside their sandbox, they play inside everybody's sandbox. And it's not just marketing telling them, well, you need to make the site look like this, and then developers saying, well, we can only build it like this, so make it look like this. It's not that designers don't have to be the yes people of the organization or of the project that they work on. If they're freelancers, they can really help learn from and then drive projects and disrupt industries. Like I see the companies that are design driven really approach things in a different and unique way, and that ends up being beneficial to the overall company. So I think that's where I hope design is really moving towards as a whole.
And okay, so you just launched a course on becoming a better freelancer, and I think that many freelancers out there are excited to take it and looking forward to learning from your experience. So how can I become a better freelancer? What are some of the takeaways?
Sure, and I think the main takeaway, like there's 7 lessons, and I really suck at talking about my own stuff. I'm good at
I'm gonna milk it out of you. It's the teaser trailer for the course.
Exactly. So I think the main thing is that a lot of freelancers don't spend enough time doing research. The kind of arc of moving into freelance is, okay, I have a bit of a portfolio, I'm gonna launch a website, and then where are the clients? And it's like it doesn't work like that. And a lot of times, because I've switched niches 3 or 4 times in my career with the type of people that I work with, and I think a lot of freelancers need to do a bit of research. It's just like freelancing is launching a company. And when companies launch products or services, they test the market and they talk to their potential audience and they try to gauge interest, if there's value there, and if they're the type of people that are going to spend the type of money that that freelancer wants to make. So every time I've kind of jumped and shifted in terms of the area that I like to focus on, I've done some research first, and I've seen so many other freelancers who do this, and not enough freelancers do. So I think that the main takeaway of the course, or with any, don't even take the course, like do a bit of research on your target audience to see if they're the type of people that hire freelancers like you, but as well talk to them about the type of freelancers that they have hired. Why did they hire them? Because if I look at some of the research that I've done for web design, I talked to, in the last couple weeks, I talked to a few people who hire freelancers that have like 7-figure businesses that obviously do well. Like, why did you hire so-and-so to do your web design? And most web designers think like, okay, that I get hired because I'm the best graphic designer, or I also know CSS and HTML or that sort of thing. None of the people that I talked to gave a shit about that. All they care about is that the designer understands their business and understands how they can make their business do better on the web. So in doing a bit of research, I can see, like, if you look at the sales pages on my site, or if you look at the design, I'm not taking on clients, so it's kind of weird right now, but if you look at the like portfolio page of my site, there's no graphics of any of the sites I've done. All I talk about is business. All I talk about is helping clients do better with their business, because in all the research that I've done, that's all my clients and potential clients care about. So the research aspect is huge, and that's part of the creative class course, is giving freelancers the tools to do a bit of research on their own to kind of get and properly gauge the audience that they want to go after.
And okay, so this is sort of a fun question. You've written books about these topics too, and I'm both an author and a freelancer myself. Have you applied some of those same lessons? Like, do you do the same kind of research on your readership that you do for potential clients?
Oh, heck yeah. Like, for every book that I launch, I get my beta readers, because like I said, I suck at talking about my own stuff. So I get my beta readers of every book to tell me about my book. And then I take that, and if it's really good and punchy, that's a testimonial. If it kind of gets to the point but isn't really, like, I can't pull from it specifically, then that becomes what I use to help write the sales copy, because a lot of times what people are going to value from what you've created, whether it's web design or a book or anything, may not be what you think it is. It may be something entirely different. And I've been surprised with some of the books that I've written where I've thought it was going to be of value for this reason, and then I ask my audience to tell me about the book, and they find something else entirely is what they really care about. And then that becomes a sales page that helps sell books a lot easier than me thinking I know what they want. If you just ask them, you just talk to them, you get a lot of good information there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Do you literally ask them, like, can you write me 3 to 5 sentences on what my book's about?
Yeah, tell me about my book in a paragraph.
Nice. No, yeah, write the dust jacket copy.
Exactly.
Very cool. So, specific tools or recommend, could be like software tools or services that you use or resources that you've used. Just anything specific that you've found helpful for your own work.
Yeah, I think for regardless of what you do, a mailing list is going to be the biggest and best tool, whether it's writing books or launching products or selling services. Mailing lists above everybody thinks that social media is the best. Social media doesn't do anything. Like you look at conversion rates on social media and it's typically less than 1% if you're doing everything right. It becomes decimal places of 1% if you're not. So the best you can do is about a 1% conversion rate on social media, whereas email marketing and email, not even like I call it email marketing, even though like my own list, I sell to my list maybe once or twice a year because I don't release that much stuff, but then the rest of the year I'm providing value. So my open rates are insane. My business is driven through my mailing list. That's where I sell my books. That's where most people like sign up for my courses. That's where most people find out about me and hire me to do web design. And it's just a matter of mailing lists are great because you can stay on people's radar in a place that they always check. Everybody checks their email. I'm not going to log into Twitter and look like, okay, I didn't log in for 2 days. I'm going to read every single tweet that I missed. So the more that you can kind of use your mailing list to your advantage, whether like if you're just a freelancer web designer, then if it's just a matter of showcasing your latest work or keeping in touch and following up, or if you're doing, I know a few people that have said like, okay, I'm going to raise my rates, but I'm going to send an email to my mailing list first saying, if you want the current rate, book some time, pre-book some time for me in the next week, and then you'll be locked in for that rate. I know people that fill their calendars for an entire quarter just doing that. So I think the mailing list is the biggest tool regardless of what you do because that allows you to show up where your audience is always checking.
So mailing lists are interesting because I think that there's sort of been a gravitational pull towards them in terms of online content and reaching people in the past few years, and that's sort of driven, almost been backwash from social media. So how did you build your list, and how do you make sure that you continue to delight the people on that list? Because nobody wants spam, right?
Exactly. So the main thing that I do is stay consistent. So my mailing list is called the Sunday Dispatches, not because it sounds pretty, but because it forces me to send out an email every Sunday. And every Sunday, other than like the once a year when I'm selling something, I tell a story. And it's always a story that relates to something that my audience cares about. And my audience is kind of diverse because it's some people that like my writing, some people that just like my bad sense of humor, some web design clients, other web designers. So it's kind of a diverse audience, but still they all kind of share similar values and motivations and pain. So I always try to write about that. And the way that I've grown my list is really just by writing great content. It's just like growing a blog. It's like the more good content that you write, the more people are going to sign up. I didn't do any freebies like sign up and get this thing. I think I have 1 or 2 reports that I did once or twice, but the benefit of being on my list is that you get content before it goes onto my site or before it goes anywhere else. And that's it. I don't care about any of these like fancy, tricky, like sign up and get this like free download. There are some free stuff if you sign up, but that's not really the main push. It's like if you want to read my stuff, if you like my articles, you'll like my list because you get those articles first. And that's really how I've approached it. And then it's just more like storytelling and providing value, and that was kind of when I started doing this 2 years ago. There was not that many people doing that, and I see a shift towards that, which I really like because I was sick of getting newsletters that were just like, here, buy my stuff. It's like, why am I signing up for this? I want to be on somebody's mailing list, and it's because they're continually providing value. So I figured I'll just do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And do you post that same, like your Sunday Dispatches, do you post that content on your blog or as articles elsewhere?
Sometimes, not all the time. So I'd say probably about 70-80% of the time I do post it on my site, and then I'm also syndicated on Huffington Post, The Next Web, Inc. Magazine, and a few other places. So the articles go to the mailing list, and then sometimes they go to my site. And then if they're on my site, they get syndicated out to a wider network. But it always goes to my list first.
Great. So, I actually reached out to you because I read a really interesting article of yours. So this is a perfect example, right? And it was about survivorship bias. And I found it really interesting because when you look, I feel like and I don't know, again, if this has changed in the past couple of years or if I'm just paying more attention to it. But there's such an enormous amount of content out there that's advice based on the success of a few sort of rock stars in their given field. So one of the examples you give in the article is a lot of authors look to Tim Ferriss as sort of a role model for publishing success. He obviously has spent quite a bit of time at the top of the New York Times bestseller list and was also quite analytical about his process and somewhat transparent about it. And so a lot of people look to him and try to, or others like him, and try to model their own success based on the lessons that he presents. And obviously that's one specific example, but you can look to many others. And within the business community, it's sort of like, how can you be a CEO like Steve Jobs was, right? And so I maybe you can talk a little bit about what survivorship bias is and why it's interesting in this context.
Yeah, so I think survivorship bias is basically the things that work rise to the top in as far as acknowledgement goes. So when Tim Ferriss writes a book and it does well, and he writes about why it does well, that's going to disseminate throughout the whole internet. Whereas other people that have tried different things that may have worked or may not have worked may not rise to the top. So, but I think that the main point there is the emulation thing that you brought up, and it's things that work for Tim Ferriss because he's Tim Ferriss. Like, he has a massive audience like me. Like, when he releases a book, I go buy it. Like, I've read all his books. I love his books. But he could write something that isn't the best thing ever, and I would still probably buy it, and I would still probably like it a bit because it's Tim Ferriss. And when I look at my own career and my own, like, writing, obviously I don't sell as many books, but I do sell quite a few books. And the way that I've done it has been almost the exact opposite of, like, popular advice on writing and becoming a bestseller, that sort of thing. And it works for me. And it's like, well...
Like what? Like what?
Well, for my first book, I gave away adopted llamas as a contest. I also don't care about a lot of things that authors care about. Like, I'm not sitting there, especially self-published authors. I almost never tweet about my books. I almost never say, like, go buy my book on social media. I almost never say go buy my book or read my book on my mailing list or anything like that. So I don't directly promote the products that I have, other than, like, saying, hey, this is launched, you might want to check it out if it's interesting. What I do promote is the content that I write, and that content drives people to, if they want to learn more, to buy my books or sign up for a course or to sign up for my list and then get more of me in their inbox and then buy it. And I see that, like, a lot of self-promotions, like, oh, you need to tweet about your book once a day, or I was like, I don't care. I don't do any of that, and I still sell a lot of books. So I just think that, but then also, I don't mind continuing the way that I do it, is because I do it in a way that works for me. And I think if I was trying to be like Tim Ferriss, I would get bored or pissed off at my efforts because I'm not Tim Ferriss.
I'm still not Tim Ferriss.
Exactly, yes. I still don't have a 4-hour body or work. So I think that the way that because I kind of see this as a long game. Like, I'm trying to create a body of work. I'm not trying to just have a book or a course or do one website or something like that. And I want to be happy with the work that I do. So if I do it in a way that works for me, I don't know if it'll succeed or not, but then Tim Ferriss doesn't know if it's going to succeed or not. He's more likely to succeed because he's Tim Ferriss, but still, everything is an experiment, so I would rather experiment with the stuff that I want to experiment with to see if it works or not, because then if I succeed, I'm succeeding on my own merits and values instead of somebody else's. And if I fail, then I've just learned something and I can try something different.
And so what's the takeaway for, say, a first-time author or an aspiring author or anyone, right? Anyone trying to launch a new product. If they're not going to emulate role models, what should they optimize for?
Well, I think that it's good to learn from these role models and but then it kind of goes like right now, advice, implementation. It should go advice, critical thinking, implementation. So if you read some advice, does this work for you? Does this work for your audience? If so, try it in your own way. If not, don't do it. So I guess the two part and parcel with that is that everything you write, you need to market and promote. You can't just release something and hope something does well. It's just like you can't become a freelancer, launch your website, and just like, ooh, where are the clients? They're not there. They don't know. So there needs to be promotion, and there needs to be like getting the word out, basically. But that can be done in a way that works for you. And a lot of authors spend so much time writing their book, and then they don't spend enough time crafting their marketing or developing what the story of the book is. And the story of the book is a lot of the times different than what the actual content is because it can relate to a bigger message. But that's really what draws people in to want to learn more about it, and that's what turns books kind of more into movements instead of just this is a single piece of work. It becomes a thing, like Tim Ferriss's 4-hour thing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I have a question for you, and I found this interesting because I've been lucky enough to talk to a number of authors who are also entrepreneurs. And one of the pieces that I find sort of particularly fascinating is that books becoming movements happens a lot, and I feel like people are very analytical about how to do it, especially for nonfiction. But fiction seems to be a little bit different. I don't think anybody's really nailed that on the head yet, right? Like in terms of discovery for fiction. Do you have any thoughts there? I know you've never written fiction, but I write fiction, so I find it interesting, and it's something I'm always experimenting with. So I love to get different perspectives on it.
Yeah. I think it's more that the type of people that write nonfiction are the type of people that are really into marketing and business and all of that. And the type of people, like I know a lot of fiction authors who are they're in it for the craft and the art and connecting with their audience. So I think a lot of similar things could apply. It doesn't happen as much. But like if you look at like the big nonfiction books, like there's a huge marketing component to all of them that kind of dives more into the psyche of their audience and how they relate to a topic that's bigger than the book. Like with vampires and werewolves, it's like that's kind of a thing that a lot of people talk about, and that there's ways to kind of play off of that. But yeah, so it's interesting. It would be interesting to apply a lot of like the Tim Ferriss or Seth Godin advice to like a fiction book and see like if it was done in a way that worked for that author, how well and what the returns they would net might be. So I would like to see that experiment.
Cool. Yeah, I'd like to participate in it. So yeah, I think it's a sort of a fun little niche. So speaking of books, what are the best books you've read recently?
The Chris Brogan's latest. I can't remember it now. Something with freak in the title.
Okay, I'll look it up.
I can't remember. That's horrible. I read it and I was like, oh, that's really good. The new book, speaking of book marketing, I actually like the book that Tim Ferriss, Ryan Holiday, and a third author whose name I can't remember wrote on book marketing. Also, don't remember the name of it. And then Haruki Murakami's 1Q84. It's my favorite nonfiction book of this year by far. Fiction book, yes.
Yeah. No, that's actually on my reading list, so I'm really excited. I'll find the titles to those books and include them in the show notes so people can.
Nice, yeah, because I'm awful at those kind of things. But yeah, 1Q84 is really, really long, but it's all of it. I love all of Haruki Murakami's books, so.
Super lyrical, yeah, really unbelievably talented writer.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question. What's the most important question I'm not asking?
I think you asked all the important questions. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I can't think of any other ones. I think you asked all of the right questions. I feel like I talked about all the things that I think are the most important things to talk about. So, good job.
Cool. All right. Well, that's good for sure. So, where can people find you on the internet?
Well, I'm on the social media on Twitter, PJRVS. But mostly, like I said, I write for my mailing list. I talk to my mailing list the most. My mailing list is on, if you go to pjrbs.com, my mailing list sign-up is on every page because that's the most important thing that I do. And then I also just launched the freelancing class we talked about, the creative class, and it is at thecreativeclass.io. Got
it. Perfect. Sounds good. And just for all of our listeners out there, I am on your mailing list, so you get some extra social validation. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for making the time today. I really appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure, and I'm really glad we get to share some of your wisdom on the creative class with the rest of the world.
Cool. Thanks, Eliot.
All right. Cheers.